guys, welcome to another episode of TFL's Top 10. And Nathan, we've got a great top 10.
These are used cars to avoid.
And by the way, if you're wondering about the cool cars behind us, you'll have to wonder a little bit longer because we're going to talk about that at the end of this video. But let's get right to it. Number 10, Nathan, what is it?
The 2008 Subaru Wrx.
The first of the third generation. And the problem with that car, well, was simple. They tried to convert the WRX from a rally car into the Toyota Camry.
It seemed like it. Yeah, the blistered fenders and all that other stuff wasn't part of that package, and it only had 224 horsepower. But they came along later on, gave it wider fenders, gave it more power, gave it more personality.
Yeah, because people hated it. Nobody was buying them. So that's the 1 year of the WRX you do not want to buy unless you really want a Camry with a Subaru badge on it.
That's right. Let's move on to number 9, which is the 2011 Jeep Wrangler.
What's wrong with that Jeep?
Well, they redid the interior, right? But they didn't redo the engine. It had a 3.8 liter V6 that put out 202 horsepower.
Yeah, and the next year they put the Pentastar, which gave you this pretty much the same fuel economy and like 80 more horsepower.
Yeah, it was a significant problem.
Well, it was a significant upgrade, so if you were one with the old boat anger and the new interior, but not the new engine, you're kind of feeling, well, I think like you got the short end of the Jeep Wrangler stick. All right, number 8, Nathan.
It's the 2001 to 2006 Mini Cooper with the CVT, continuously variable transmission. Big problem with this one.
Yeah, there were two big problems. First and foremost, the transmission would fail without any warning, so it would leave you stuck. And the failure rate on those transmissions was pretty much 100%.
Yeah, they really had a big problem with that, including a class action lawsuit. They had to take care of those cars and get rid of them.
All right, Nathan, what about number 7?
That's the first generation or the very early Nissan Leaf.
Yes, the first 2 years of the Nissan Leaf, the electric Leaf, the car you want to avoid like the plague because it is one of a handful of cars where the battery is not cooled or heated, but just environmentally in the state that it's supposed to be in, which means that it overheats and gets very cold, which means
they had to replace the battery.
Yeah, because it stopped actually working really well and people lost all their range. The number 6 car actually had to go, Nathan, to the dealership and test drive and pretend I was going to buy it because Honda never gave us one to test drive. And what is that?
That is the 2010 to 2016 Honda CRZ.
Oh man, that was a sexy looking car. I thought it was going to be the new incarnation of the SI. And then I get behind the wheel, and it's a wah-wah-wah
Yeah, it's
hybrid.
no CRX at all.
No.
And unfortunately, even though they had a manual transmission available with that car, it never went as fast as it looked, even though they did have later on a supercharger that you could buy.
Add onto it. Yeah.
Right, but even then, it just wasn't quite what they were hoping for.
It was like performance car looks, hybrid driving experience, and get this, in Europe it had a back seat, and when they brought it to America, they removed the back seat and left the 2 holes back there.
Yeah, you can literally see where the seats went, but you didn't get them. It's ridiculous. Let's move on to number 5.
Oh, this one's close to my heart. Number 5, you tell them.
It's the Ford Raptor, the very first generation of the Ford Raptor with a 5.4 liter V8.
Yeah, there are a couple issues with that. First of all, foremost, the biggest issue is 6.2 liter, right? So why would you get the 5.4 liter when you can get the 6.2 liter? But a bigger issue was it was only available as an extended cab.
Right, and it was really cramped in the back seat. It wasn't enough truck considering how much suspension it had and how much power it should have had.
And you know what, Nathan? I hate clamshell doors, right? I hate being trapped in the back seat waiting for the front passenger to open their door so that I can get out. All right, number 4 is a brand new car.
Yeah, it is. Now, listen, guys, this is actually based on other people's testimony, but an awful lot of people, including people we know. And that's the Tesla Model X.
The 2016, the brand new one. And you know what? That car was late to the game, and Elon wanted those gull wing doors come hell or high water, and it's got all kinds of reliability issues. There's actually videos of those doors chopping cucumbers in half.
But there's also problems with the interior and a whole bunch of other ones. It's just unfortunate because they started off with a high with the S, and then this one, not so much.
Anton Wallman, my friend who's also an EV expert, actually bought one and held on to it for, I think it was a total of like less than a month before he got rid of it.
Yeah, Anton's not liking this car.
No, it was not. All right. Now this one, actually this one is close and near to your heart, the number 3.
Yeah, the 1998 to 2004 Land Rover Discovery 2. Now, the Land Rover Discovery, initially, I had the first generation model with the manual transmission.
Series 1.
And it had a lot of problems, a lot of reliability issues, and they did not get solved with the Model 2 or the second generation. So they stopped calling them Discoveries for years to distance themselves from the bad reputation of the Discovery. And they're only now bringing them back in droves.
Yeah, that's why the Series 3 in Europe was the LR4 here in the United States, because it had such terrible reputation. My neighbor had one, and actually he had mold in the car because what happened was the windshield would not properly seal because it did not properly fit in the frame, and so water would pour into the car.
Right.
Mold. It was actually lemon. He had to sue Land Rover. That's just one of the examples of the many things that were wrong with a really cool and great car, but reliably no good.
All right, let's go to number 2, which is the Chrysler Sebring. And why is this on our list?
Well, that's on our list because it defines the term rent-a-car.
Unfortunately, it never inspired anything other than hatred and dislike. It was never anything in terms of passionate or enjoyable. It was just a rental car.
Yeah, they made it as cheaply as possible, and they sold it as cheaply as possible. And they also had to change the name from Sebring to Chrysler 200 because it got such a bad reputation for
The
being a
200,
car.
yeah, but the 200 was a really big leap, and even that car has a ton of problems. But when you talk about cheaply, that brings us to number 1.
Yeah, you know, nowadays, Nathan, there are very few crap cars, right? Cars that you can point to and you could say, that is just a really bad car. And this, to me, represents the last of those crap cars. It is...
The Chevy Aveo, the 2002 to 2011.
Yeah, the problem with the Aveo was, you know, it was one of those things where Chevy needed a small car, and instead of designing a small car, they decided, hey, let's rebrand, how about a Daewoo, and call it an Aveo. And what you got was kind of the worst of both worlds. You got crappy reliability, crappy styling, and you got a very crappy car.
Yeah, unfortunately, it just wasn't up to the standards that other cars were living up to at the time. And frankly speaking, its price wasn't that much cheaper than much, much better cars.
Yeah, lazy engineering and poorly executed.
The interior was abysmal. I could tell you that for sure.
Yeah, I was actually scared to drive in it. I was coming home from the airport, and I was scared to do 675 on the highway because it felt like it was going to like drive into a tree.
Yeah, its replacement, the Spark, and to a lesser extent the Sonic, much better cars.
All right, as always, we do a couple bonuses, so here's my bonus, Nathan.
All right, go ahead.
Any California electric compliance car, and the reason for that is, well, before I tell you the reason, let me name those cars.
Sure.
So we're talking about like the RAV4 electric, the Soul electric, the Fiat 500 electric, the Smart electric. There's a whole bunch of them. There's about 11 of them. And the reason for that is because they were all built to comply with California's rules, and they were never a fully developed and engineered vehicle. And bigger reason in my book is why buy yesterday's technology when you could buy today's technology. So none of them go over 100 miles. None of them were actually sold outside of California, or very rarely sold because nobody would buy them,
Right.
without huge subsidies, without huge HOV. They were just really poor, basic first-gen electric cars, and I hate them all. I hate the legislation that made them possible. The whole thing is just non-competitive and just stupid.
All right, mine's a little different because mine, I feel, is a sacrifice made to keep a name brand going. And that's the Jaguar X-Type and S-Type. Both of those vehicles, I feel, are...
Ouch! Ouch!
I know it's painful, but guys, you're paying too much money for those cars. They are not worth what you're spending your money on. And even though Roman has a love of one of them for some ungodly reason, they're not worth it.
Look, I own an X-Type, all right? And the reason I bought an X-Type is because I wanted a Jaguar and it was all-wheel drive. And yes, of course, it was a rebranded Ford Mondeo. It was when Ford owned Jaguar. But you know what? The styling on the car wasn't bad. The reliability wasn't bad. It was, you know, there were some quirks. For instance, I had the 2.5 liter, which was the only way you can get it with a manual. But of course, the faster car was automatic. The 3 liter made no sense. But as a car, I owned it, well, leased it for 3 years. It ran. It was somewhat sexy. It was very good in the snow. And I think those cars have gotten a bad rap.
Unfortunately, during the 60s, when Roman was doing heavy drugs, he forgot that having a real Jaguar versus a fake Jaguar Major difference between the two of them. Thank you guys for joining us. We do appreciate it. And now tell them about these cars.
Oh yeah. So the car behind us, of course, is the brand new Chevy Corvette, the Grand Sport, and of course the Hellcat. And me and Nathan are in the process of actually mashing them up for a classic TFL review, figuring out which of the two is better to buy as a car if you have 80 grand to spend. As a boy toy.
As a boy toy.
Yeah, and by the way, guys, if you go over to TFL Truck right now, we've got a video there, the opposite side of this coin, which is basically the top 5 trucks that you should buy, used trucks that you should buy. So if you want to see the opposite, not cars to avoid, but trucks to buy, go over to TFL Truck, and we can actually do a link up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
As always, this is Roman.
And Nathan.
Saying thanks for watching, and stay tuned for that mashup review. That's going to be a lot of fun.
See you guys.